Warm coat with you?
Yeah, no, I have I gave him my warm coat. This is the difference between a rich institution and a poor institution.
Yeah, that's true. I'm more used to the poor.
Right. That's why we wanted to make you feel at home.
Well, good morning. I would like to ask the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Wilson Center, Ambassador Joseph Gildenhorn, to come up to start us off with welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Paulo, and welcome everyone to the Wilson Center. I'm Joseph Gildenhorn, Chairman of the Board of the Center, and it's a great honor to welcome President Fernando Henrique Cardoso back to the Wilson Center again. Let me also give a warm welcome to Professor Albert Fishlow, a pioneer of Brazilian studies in the United States, who has just finished a new book on Brazil and will now join President Cardoso in today's discussion of Brazil's future prospects, with a special emphasis on the period after President Lula leaves office next year. We are really grateful to Peter Hakem, President of the Inter-American Dialogue, which is a co-sponsor of today's event, along with the Brazil Institute here at the Wilson Center. Last September, we celebrated Brazil's impressive progress by honoring President Lula in New York by bestowing on him with the Woodrow Wilson Award for Public Service. The tribute presented on that occasion made clear that Brazil's recent achievements are the result of the hard work of many dedicated men and women who understand that Brazil can only continue to fulfill its great potential by following a Western democracy model with an emphasis on economic development and stability. And as most of you know, economic stability was and remains the center of President Cardoso's great legacy. It should be noted that President Cardoso has maintained historic ties with the Wilson Center. 30 years ago, he was one of a handful of leading scholars who advised the Wilson Center to create a Latin American program. This program has continued and is now led by its outstanding director, Cynthia Arnson. It's also with the encouragement and support of the Cardoso government that we established the Wilson Center's Brazil project in the year 2000, which has since become the Brazil Institute, now led by the energetic and engaged director, Paulo Sotero. Mr. President, we are grateful for your assistance and the guidance you have provided us over the many years. I would now ask Tony Harrington, Chairman of the Brazil Institute Advisory Board and former U.S. Ambassador to Brazil, to introduce our distinguished speakers. Tony?
Thank you, Joe. As Joe mentioned, I had the honor to represent the United States in Brazil during President Cardoso's government. My wife, Hope, and I were warmly received in Brasilia by President Cardoso and Dona Ruchi Cardoso, whose memory and whose own public service we will always honor. The mandate I received from President Clinton in going to Brazil reflected not only his understanding of Brazil's growing importance in the Americas and globally, but also his respect and personal friendship he had developed with President Cardoso. This recognition of Brazil's leadership and growth have continued under Presidents Bush and Obama, and I have endeavored to contribute to the bilateral relationship through the important work of the Woodrow Wilson Center, Brazil Institute, and otherwise. Now we just need to get the U.S. Senate to confirm a successor in Tom Shannon, a very competent representative that we need in place in Brasilia as ambassador. Mutual trust, shared values, and converging interests form the basis of a productive U.S.-Brazil relationship, and I'm quite hopeful this will continue with President Obama in the final year of the Lula administration upcoming and beyond. A university professor turned politician after he was banned from teaching by a military government, President Cardoso was the first Brazilian leader to be elected and re-elected on the first ballot. He laid fiscal and institutional foundations on which President Lula has wisely built, and he was also the first to organize an institutional framework for the transition of government, ensuring a smooth beginning for the Lula administration. In the interest of time, I refer you to the biographical notes of both President Cardoso and Professor Fishlow included in the program. Let me just add a couple of observations. First, I want to highlight Professor Fishlow's many contributions to educating generations of American students and scholars on Brazil. He's filled a gap that sorely needed, and the book he's just finished is but the latest example. I'm sure you'll tell us the title so we can all acquire it soon. Secondly, I'd share with you a thought about the significance of President Cardoso's many contributions, both as president and thereafter as a leading voice of the opposition. He governed the country and participates in today's public debate in Brazil and beyond on the world stage, guided by his deep knowledge and devotion to Brazil and by his personal conviction that to be sustainable, the country's economic and political rise must continue to be supported by strengthening the institutions of freedom, democracy, justice, and respect for human rights. This will be one of the challenges Brazil will continue to face, regardless of who is elected next October to succeed President Lula, and these challenges are the topic of today's discussions. I'd like to invite President Cardoso to start us off. Mr. President.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for what has been said about what I eventually did when I was in office and also in my public life. I will ask you to allow me to speak from here because I hate this kind of thing because I have to stand and it's more difficult to look at you after you. Now I can control you from here more easily. And it's less formal, and I prefer always things less formal. So I'm very grateful to have been again invited to come to this place, as has been said before by the chairman of the board and also by my good friend Harrington. I have old connections. I remember when we were using the Castle at the Wilson Center there, and Abe Lowenthal and also Albert Hirschman. We decided together to try to invite the Wilson Foundation the Brookings Foundation, the Wilson Center to launch a program on Latin American studies. We are not quite clear at the time what about could be these studies, but the selection was very good, the first one, and this continued to be, and the contribution is enormous in order to debate more in depth the situation in Latin America and also the relationship between the USA and Latin America. So thank you very much again. And that time is to me is very very helpful to be with Albert Fishlow, and I will tell you why. Because when Albert came to Brazil in the 60s, I was yet in Brazil even before I was working in Brazil in Sebrap even after my stay in Chile in exile, and he was working to the Brazilian government, the military regime there. But he produced a so provocative study on income distribution that he became immediately the leader of the opposition. Imagine you, Professor Albert Fishlow, a man who always presents himself as in a modest way, becoming a leader of the opposition. And he came to see me in my small office. Peter, you said that this is a rich institution, yours is a poor one. Imagine mine at the time. It was in an old house in Sao Paulo, and Fishlow came, and he was showing the results of a survey on income distribution. This was when the Brazilian economic performance was pleased all over the world as a miracle. And it was a miracle, in fact. But a miracle on the realm of the economy, not on social areas, and not in terms of income distribution. And then it was Albert Fishlow who really, called attention for this kind of tremendous inequalities in Brazil. Later on, in 1971, I came I stayed for 1 year or so at Stanford, and Fischler was teaching at Berkeley, and one of his teachers' students named Pedro Malin was there. I knew Malin before, but when Malin was at Berkeley and I in Stanford, our relationship increased a lot. And as you know, Malin was my first head of central bank from President Itamar Franco when I was finance minister, and then became finance minister 80 years along when I was in office. And highly influenced by Albert Fischler. So the one Fischler speaks about what we did in Brazil, not we, he did too, together. So that's our reasons enough to be very pleased in being here. I was also surprised when I received the information that the discussion would be about how it's said here, after Lula, something like that. The challenge of Brazil after Lula. Well, Lula is yet there. It's a little bit risky to speak about after Lula. Lula is there. If I criticize him too much, I can be punished. So better to be cautious in discussing the after. So I have to praise before what's going on now. But anyhow, I think it is important to move our minds to see what can occur after Lula. I read very superficially Fischler's book because I received it just before I came to here. But I have a sense of the way how he dealt with the question, with analyzing my government and Lula's government. And to some extent, the whole thing is presented as if it were a continuity. And in some aspects, it's true. There are lots of continuities when we look back. Continuity in several senses. Not just because of me or Lula, but because of Brazilian society in practice. We evolved a lot in Brazil. It's obvious that now Brazil, in terms of institutions, is stronger than have been before. Then I will make a small comment to criticize a little bit what's going on now in nowadays. But anyhow, altogether, I would say the institutions became much more stronger in Brazil. No doubts about it. And as I said this morning in another meeting, I had to speak something today. The point is that we have been capable in Brazil to transform the administration, the state apparatus, in order to cope with globalization, without having conscience of that. We're just dealing with day-by-day problem. But in practice, the main challenge was how to adjust the Brazilian economy to the world challenges. We had, as you know, a old bureaucracy in Brazil. Maybe if you compare Brazil with other Latin American countries since the 19th century, the main characteristic of Brazil was a strong government. Strong not in the sense of authoritarian, but a more competent government. And why? By a simple reason. Because the Portuguese Empire moved to Brazil at the beginning of the 19th century with all the administration. This is a unique case in the world. Yeah, an empire moved to the periphery with institutions. The Brazilian library is the Portuguese library, and so on and so forth. One day, I was still in office. I invited the President of Portugal to come to celebrate our independence, September the 7th, and he came. And to my, not surprise, but then to be reminded about the question, every time when a new regiment appeared, the voice on the song said, well, I mean, on the microphone said, well, this is the regiment, I don't know what, the first of artillery, who was organized by the Queen Maria I from Portugal. So the continuity, even in the army, is like that. Our regiments have been originated in Portugal. And we still did, in the Independence Day, we proclaim that this is ours. So we have a very strong heritage from the administrative point of view. So the bureaucracy with judges, and even an aristocracy. The Brazilians invented an aristocracy. We had the Portuguese aristocracy, but since the king of Portugal went back to Portugal and his son stayed in Brazil, and then married with the daughter of the Archduke of Austria. So he became to Habsburg. His son is a Habsburg, and the first king was also married, as I said, to the daughter of the Archduke of Austria, whose other daughter was married to Napoleon. So we are very well placed in the old aristocracy, but without having a proper aristocracy in Brazil. So what the Brazilian king did, created an aristocracy. And it's very good that, because it's costless. It's a ladder. I promote you to baron, viscount. Not necessary to have bribery or to spend public money to honor to give honors to people. You see, so we had this and very well trained bureaucracy with some sounds of aristocracy since ever. So it was not that difficult to include now some elements of technocracy inside this old bureaucracy. So we have, this is why the foreign affairs in Brazil is well trained, it has good quality. I'm not just placing the present, current ambassadors and diplomats here, but it's a historic event. It's true like that. Even the Brazilian army or the financial, administration in Brazil, the central bank, so on and so forth. So what happened is that we, to some extent, we modernized that bureaucracy, and we create new institutions. This was not easy, to turn more independent some bureaucratic boards, becoming non-bureaucratic properly by giving them as regulatory agencies some legitimacy to act without being necessarily tied to government's ideas. So this has been done in Brazil, enormous transformation in that sense. Secondly, and this is society, it's not government, the Brazilian entrepreneurs have been always very active, since ever in the agriculture, since ever. Brazil, as America, was created by becoming an exporter of agricultural exporters, so very competent. What we did was just to, again, to modernize. Competent agriculturalists, but with a tradition of being too close to government and to receive loans from the official banks and not to repay. So we try to modernize that, creating a more competent instrument to finance the agricultural side of the Brazilian economy independently from official sources. So by using market instruments to promote the agricultural development. Then we privatize. So then after that I have been highly criticized because of that. But the point is that our telecommunication system was expanded during the military regime and with very high competence, very high competence. They did. But we were without the resource to continue to invest. And because of IT revolution in the world, we were badly needing to absorb new technologies. So we privatized. When we started, the decision has been taken in '97 to privatize. We had something like around, let's say, 2 million cell phones. Today we have 160 million cell phones in 10 years. It was a tremendous transformation. It would be impossible to enter into the modernity without a new telecommunication system. How can we have access to internet without that? So that has been done, and again with the idea that what is important is to give more strength to institutions. So we create these regulatory bodies. They have some independence vis-à-vis the government, and to promote this institutionalization. And the way how we proceed in our privatization program was, again, having in mind that it's very important to keep competitiveness in the system, and not monopoly. Public monopoly is as bad as private monopoly. Maybe private monopoly is still worse than the public monopoly. So the idea was not to monopolize, but to force competition. And you have this. The decision was behind every one of the big economic areas. If you look at the steel industry, again, We have not just competitiveness, but also the preoccupation to distribute between private sector, national and foreign, plus state sectors, competing. And that is how normally the situation evolves in Brazil. We never went toward the so-called neoliberal approach. We have a kind of mixed approach, giving leaving in the hands of the state some leverage. Look, the financial system. The financial system was like that too. So we have in Brazil the Banco do Brasil, which is an official bank. The Banco do Brasil was there, and in the past the Banco do Brasil was, controlled by political forces, and that's why the agriculturalists preferred not to pay. They were able not to pay because they have political power. So what we did was to transform the Banco do Brasil into a corporation, following the market rules. The same applies to Petrobras. The big, step ahead was the transformation of Petrobras into a corporation, even issuing IPOs in the United States. And Brazilian state companies have been always mixed companies. They have always share bonds in the hands of the market since the beginning. So it is not a novelty. Since the beginning, we gave much more, a market-oriented action to the companies. You see, this has been done. So when we decided not to privatize the Banco do Brasil, but force the Banco do Brasil to compete with other private sectors, and even we decided to open up the market for foreign to invest in the banking area. Today, the state banking system has more or less half of the deposits and loans, etc. The same, and the other half is 1/4 is Brazilian, 1/4 is foreign. So it's balanced. This has been done in Brazil, maybe without awareness of that. I had behind my mind. I was trying to monitorize in different sectors how to rebuild the Brazilian economy in such a way that competition could be there, in such a way that the government eye could be there, some leverage for the government, and trying to restrict political interference on the market. So then, and we refer only to that. Then I will ask President Fischler Professor Fischler to contribute to enlighten our knowledge about the situation in Brazil. But anyhow, then not just in the economy, the idea was let's reestablish a more balanced economy, taking into account the market rules, and also that the government has to play some role. Secondly, let's to turn more robust the institutions in general. And third, because of democracy, it will be impossible in Brazil to continue to behave as in the past. That is to say, to increase the rate of growth in investment in expense of the social welfare. In the 70s and 80s, this was normal. So our rate of our saving rates and our rate of investment was much higher than now, but our social expenditure much less. So we increased taxes in Brazil. It's true, because we had to balance the situation because of democracy, because of social pressure. How to give access to land for people, how to give better education, or at least not better, to enlarge the enrollment in education without expanding. How to do something in health system. We create a health system in Brazil. We hadn't. The Constitution described how to do. I did. In my government, we implemented, we created the health system service in Brazil. So the expenditure increased a lot. And on top of that, because of this is very, very peculiar. The World Bank and also the IDB, but mostly the World Bank, was campaigning in favor of cash transfer programs. And this has been very difficult, was very difficult because of the opposition against the idea. By whom? By those who believe that what is important is development, is to create jobs and not to give favor to people. It was extremely difficult to transform the cash transfer program in something more palatable, more acceptable. That's just to say, let's impose that if I give some money, your children have to go to attend schools. If I give some money, you have to go into the hospital service before the birthhood, so on and so forth. We did that. So then President Lula put all this together and changed the name, named Bolsa Familia, with maybe less precise goals in terms of the counterpart, and expanded the program. So now we have 11.5 million families being supported by this kind of subsidies. The point is that this increases a lot, not just the consumption, but also is decreasing the rates of inequality. It's very difficult, to diminish the Gini coefficient. It moves very slowly. But since the year 2000, this is occurring in Brazil, and it's progressively increasing. And this, in everything is like that. It's progressively increasing. So it's true that in that sense, there is a continuity. In some other sense, I think it's not that clear, the continuity. I'm not referring to macroeconomic policies. Macroeconomic policies have been accepted and absorbed, and there are kind of pillars in the Brazilian economic situation. One is at the floating exchange rate. The other one is a target to fight inflation. The other one is a so-called fiscal responsibility law, was approved in the year 2000. All this in several others, instruments now are available to control the situation. Of course, in every moment you have to change a little bit. It depends on the juncture, the economic situation. In the last 5 years, from 2004 or 3 up to 2008, the world situation was very favorable. So this was very good, and Brazil has benefited from that. Of course, now we have again to look after the over-evaluation of the currency, as we had in the past, again. So probably we have to move some elements. But in overall, the situation like that. The same applies to the social policies. And President Lula increased a lot, the cash transfer program, which benefited the population. And democracy is there. Now, my criticism, and then I give it for Professor Fischl, and I will try to learn something from him. My criticism is as follows. All trends in Latin America are still there, and even more motivated by some spectacular rhetoric events in some areas of the region in terms of anti-globalization, anti-don't know what, and a new form of development. And now because of the world crisis, again, it became fashionable that the government has to spend more, and fiscal responsibilities, the whole idea is orthodox. It's necessary to be more flexible, and let's ask in the name of Lord Keynes, poor Lord Keynes, let's ask in his name, let's pledge for the necessity of more government and less market. Okay. As I said, I'm not in favor of market that has I would say the main agent of history, but I think that we have to be a little bit more cautious in not taking into account the consequence of this kind of loose fiscal policies which are becoming to be implemented. And if you look ahead, this is after Lula, the future government will have to face a difficult fiscal situation, because the current expenditures with people, with employment, the number of public employees is going up very quickly, very rapidly in Brazil. Maybe 100,000 new ones have been added to the federal system, not to speak about the states and local governments. And the salaries are increasing enormously, 10 times higher than the average if you consider with the market salaries. So this is occurring, and because of the overvaluation of the currency, plus the economic crisis, the lack of markets for our exports, we in the future probably will face some shortage in terms of foreign currency. So the trade balance will shrink. This is not because of government, because the situation will shrink, and then so it's possible that we have to look with more caution about the forecast in terms of how to deal with that situation. But okay, this is normal. This varies from country, from moment to moment in history. It's not a problem of each government, of global situations. But there are other problems. I think that the old tradition in Latin America, in the sense that corporations and parties and coalitions between parties and corporations, and the fact that in our countries, in Brazil, the pension funds are controlled by big state corporations. The big pension funds belong to big state corporations. The fact that the big state corporations are controlled by people appointed by one half by government, the other half by the employees, and in our case, in both sides, by one party. And this party is becoming more and more influential at the economic level. It's creating a block of power. A block of power, behind this block of power, there is a party and corporations, unions, and there is a linkage between private interests, big ones, and this enormous amount of resources. When I was criticizing the authoritarian regime, once I wrote a book, an article, I don't know what, speaking of bureaucratic rings, by saying, well, the politics in Brazil are not passing through parties, they are passing through bureaucratic links. Some companies with people connect with bureaucrats, and they are taking decisions by themselves without passing through the public opinion. So something like that could occur in the future if we don't pay attention. And this is not necessarily, in my mind, good for democracy or even good for a more active market, a less monopolized market. So this is what in very vague and general terms, I will say about the future. The future is already in present. It's there, you see. But now it still is in seeds. Maybe in the future there will be more than seeds. And since the political system in Brazil is strong, but not, the idea of elections, democracy, yes, but the civic culture is not democratic. And we don't have the sense that we are all equal in front of law. There are privileges. The old idea of privilege is still very consistent. This is not a problem of government, a problem of culture. Much more difficult to change than other problems. Our culture is a non-democratic culture in that sense. So we like the elections. But after the elections, the culture is not changing, you see. Power in office changes, but the mentality not necessarily. Our parties are becoming more and more fragmented. Once I was yet in office, I said in Mexico that be alert, because the Congress become a kind of clearinghouse of lobbies. Lobbies is the contrary to a party. A party has value, ideas, a vision of society. A lobby has an interest. It's legitimate, but it's an interest. It's not a vision of society. Our parties are becoming. Now I can say this more freely, because in the past I was highly criticizing Congress because I was insulting Brazilian Congress by saying to be alert, not to become a clearinghouse of lobbies. Now I would say the Congress is becoming more and more representative of societal interests. And when a person is elected, he is not necessarily committed to what will be his behavior in the future. The election derives from the fact that the people have some popularity and some basis. What kind of base? Not electors, but a company, a church, a football club, or a local authority supporting the representative. So then he went into the Congress without knowing his electorate, no idea about. And not committed with the electorate, committed to those who have supported him. And in Congress, society goes and looks as in an aquarium, different fishes. Let's see, this fish is red, this water is green. I'm red, I'm green, so I will connect with him. So the societies try to be linked to the Congress, but the Congress not necessarily was elected in representation of. So we are democratic, we like elections, but we have to go into the content of the situation. The same applies to what I said before about the connections between big corporations and one party and pension funds and bureaucracy and government. So I think I'm trustful, I'm hopeful. I think that after Lula could be still better, but we have to not to shut down, to keep silence just because we are achieving well. So I read the book very superficially. And I try to add something. I don't know if my dear friend Albert or Fisher will be in agreement or will be still more hopeful than I am about the Brazilian future. Thank you very much. You see the age differences. He can stand up.
I want to thank Peter Hakem and Paulo Sotero for the invitation to come today. When Peter first discussed this, it was the case that I was going to be alone and talk about the book, and of course there would be an audience of about 3. And that includes my wife. Under the circumstances when this opportunity was provided in which Fernando Henrique was willing to be here as well, of course I knew that there would be a larger group, and it also meant that I would have to prepare. Which is something over the years where our paths have differentiated. Not only has Fernando Henrique become a superb politician, you will notice that he doesn't use a note when he speaks because he doesn't need to. Over the years, I've learned that that's a little dangerous, and as a consequence, I did prepare something on the occasion. The final introductory remark that I would make is precisely this element of continuity. As a consequence of this, I am certain that not only will I earn the unhappiness of the PSDB, but also on the other side, the PT will be extraordinarily unhappy by this characterization of what has been the last 15 years within Brazil. I think that element of continuity is very important, and I think it's for that reason that Brazil has finally this opportunity, virtually unique historically, to move ahead substantially. I would just like to point to the difference in what The Economist has said about Brazil. 2 years ago, the Latin American editor of The Economist came out with a book, Michael Reed, in which he spoke of Brazil continuing to grapple with relatively slow economic growth, a bloated state, social injustice, violent crime, and political corruption. If we shift fast forward 2 years and refer to the Economist section on Brazil, which came out just a few weeks ago, you will find that Brazil used to be all promise. Now it is beginning to deliver. And that kind of analysis is, I think, what is wrong. I think precisely it's the need to delve somewhat more deeply into what is going on in the country in order better to appreciate what kind of future lies ahead. There will be a new president on January 1st, 2011. He or she will assume office under circumstances that will be far more favorable than those that confronted Cardoso and Lula. The reasons are clear. Inflation as a way of life has ended, and so have the doubts about the capability of the Brazilian private sector to compete globally. Social change has increasingly become institutionalized, and those advances will continue. Finally, Brazil is on the cusp of enormous potential wealth that emanates from what seem to be quite extensive petroleum resources. So that is the present circumstance, far different than what had historically been the case. I have tried in this final section, which I have to thank both Paulo and Pedro for the opportunity to be here, because it forced me to write something down, which will be the final chapter of the book, which still doesn't have a title. So any suggestions are welcome. What I'd like to do is to pose a set of issues that I think will emerge over the course of the next years. The first relates to political structure. Brazil still awaits a definitive reform. A few years ago, I was down in Brazil, and I suggested that somebody ought to think of a political reform just like the Plano Real, that Brazil really changed its economy so fully and so fundamentally. What it has lacked on the other side is a willingness to delve deeply into the political circumstances. It is impressive to me that this process goes on. Lula just recently, on his trip to Europe, called for a constituent assembly in order to deal with the problem, which is just another way of postponing, as has been postponed for years, dealing with it. What has to be done? I think everyone knows and understands what has to be done. The first requirement is to change the present open electoral system for election to the House of Representatives to a closed one. That is to say, one has to have a set of political parties with political responsibility. And that change in which individuals are classified in the order in which they will be elected under a proportional representational system is, on the one hand, something that has been done elsewhere, and has worked effectively. Brazil has a set of circumstances where it is always reluctant to strengthen parties versus individuals. A related change, it seems to me, is that some part of the electoral process should be geographic in its character. Instead of having individuals elected by votes in the total state, there's no reason not to go to a German system where one has, on the one hand, district representation as well as at-large representation from the individual states. The notion that already a geographic base exists within the states is really inadequate in that regard, because there is a geographic basis that avoids party identification. Individuals get elected on the basis of their association within individual areas, but without close identification with their parties. The number of parties eligible to compete can be lessened by establishing minimal levels of voter support as a criterion for inclusion. There are something of the order of 20 parties currently represented within the Brazilian Congress. When you stop and think that a tripartite system was supposed to be a distorting one about individual preferences, you can multiply that up by a large factor in order to appreciate the problems associated with that kind of multiplicity. The movement toward party coherence has been underway. There is little doubt about that. But on the other side, the set of circumstances that now are appropriate to Brazil after having two unusually talented presidents, that it should be taken up. The second area that I would refer to is the question of the economy. And there I wish to point to a matter which somehow seems not at all to be discussed. Current estimates place the investment rate in Brazil at less than 20%. If Brazil intends to grow on a sustained basis at a rate of something of the order of 4.5–5% a year, an investment rate of 25% is necessary. And other developing countries like China, as you well know, have gone far behind, far above such a level. They already have something in the neighborhood of 45%. India is approaching 30%. Korea and Taiwan and others also. And I would mention even the case of Chile within the Western Hemisphere. That target requires domestic savings. Foreign contribution has to be limited. There is little reason to go beyond 2 to 3% as a prudent basis. And so the issue is, where does the savings come from? And here it seems to me that the place to start is the public sector. One has to invert what the historical circumstance had been in Brazil, where it was the government investing and the private sector doing the saving. I think those responsibilities have to be reversed simply because now Brazil has a very vibrant private sector, as can be easily observed by the foreign investment that has come forward from Brazil in the last years. The easiest way to have that reversion occur is by dealing with the Social Security system. The Brazilian Social Security system at present has a deficit of the order of around 4% of GDP. That deficit will grow. The improvements in formal employment over the last years have stemmed it by increasing resources that have been paid in, but too much is being paid out. And that circumstance will continue to worsen as the average age of the population increases. In that system, public sector workers have a very privileged position. Their average receipts come to about 10 times the average received within private sector recipients. It seems to me that the circumstance that is now there is to eliminate that deficit in the Social Security system and to use the opportunity in order to increase public savings and then allocating it for the real investment opportunities and possibilities that exist within Brazil. That sounds like a very impossible task. It seems that it is beyond capability to deal with. There have already been 2 constitutional amendments to deal with the Social Security system. There will be another one in the first year of the next president. Here is an opportunity for a move that can really make a difference to Brazil, that can set it apart from copying the United States, where we manage somehow or another always to consume and never to save. That is not a line which I think Brazil wishes to follow. That possibility is further enhanced because I think it can be tied to the new petroleum resources that have been found below the salt layer. That's going to require an enormous future investment. For that future investment to be possible, there's going to have to be savings that will occur, or one will run the risk of having excess foreign investment returning to the system, as it has occurred in the past, not only with the Asian countries, but with Mexico and a variety of others. This is an opportunity that is quite substantial. I will say a second thing about education. Education is something that Brazil cannot afford not to emphasize over future years. There has been gain in primary and secondary enrollment, but the corresponding improvement in quality has been absent The regional differentiation within the country, which is so substantial, has been narrowed, but not eliminated. Brazil spends a larger percentage of income than most developing countries and developed countries, but the comparative ranking of Brazil places it within Latin America at the lower end in terms of actual accomplishment. More resources coming from future sales of petroleum will undoubtedly help, but so too will a recognition that primary and secondary education over the course of the next 2 decades are indispensable for the higher economic growth that everyone wants. It seems to me that there inevitably one comes to confront a reality. Brazil is ranked among the countries of the world that spend the highest amount for public universities. The ratio of expenditure for universities relative to primary and secondary school is 10 to 1. The circumstances associated with higher education have yielded brilliant professors like Fernando Henrique. They have made possible advances in research and technology. That is all to the good. But when it comes at the expense of a massive system that's capable of generating the resources that Brazil inevitably will need, human resources, over the course of the next years, then one has to look more closely. One has to really see that as well as a source of potential funding in order to invest in the quality of the educational system. Finally, internationally, Brazil has become a major participant. In Copenhagen now, it is allied with India, China, and South Africa in proposing a strategy. In Basel and Geneva, its words are carefully parsed. Within a globalized world, Brazil has sought increasingly over the years to identify with the South, but not always and not completely. Such a strategy has seemingly worked, but there are questions. One of the points that I think comes out strongly is that despite rhetorical advance, there has been little practical gain. That the movement from one position to another has failed to take advantage of Brazil's increasing status in the world. Clearly, the next president will face a need for greater specificity within a climate where differences in foreign policy have now become a matter of domestic policy. And I think that's all to the good. Itamaraty has had a long and glorious history, but the notion that it can be individualized and separate from the political reality of Brazil is a mistake. I conclude. What all of this comes down to is the old issue of what kind of state Brazil should have. Others have frequently said, Brazil has a Scandinavian state in its current magnitude, but a lower income developing country state in the quality of its services. Spending more at the margin, which is the view of some, will not resolve that contradiction. Nor, on the other hand, will a generalized reduction in public expenditure really alter the circumstance. Both are very simple recipes. What the next Brazilian president must do is design a solution that will work, not merely for 4 years, but beyond. Thank you.
Well, thank you, official. We have now about half hour for questions. I would like to invite questions that preferably are of the short kind. They should start with what, how, why, things like that. But I would like to ask my dear friend Peter Hakem if he would lead us off with that type of question.
Let me just say first that thank you, Paolo, that this was a great pleasure to participate in the organization of this. These are two of the people, Fernando Henrique Cardoso and Al Fishlow, who I've over the years come most to admire for their not only leadership but their analysis in Latin America, and from whom I've learned more than I think any other two people. And it's a pleasure to have your book sitting on my shelf now, Al, and I've actually plagiarized it already. So I just let me ask a quick question about foreign policy, and particularly about U.S.-Brazilian relations. This Brazil matters every year more and more to the United States. In a variety of ways, its agenda in Latin America, its agenda globally depends more and more on Brazil. And one constantly hears, particularly at the outset of administrations, about strategic partnerships, strategic relations. Then as we get into the administration, you begin to hear a different adjective to precede relationships. It becomes annoying, frustrating, disappointing. Question: is there any way to move it in the direction of a more strategic relationship, or are we going to sort of start off with strategic in one government after another and then move toward this different set of adjectives?
I think the notion, everybody starts with this idea of a strategic relationship, but never goes beyond the words. There isn't much basis for a presumption that Brazil will be strategic for the United States any more than it's possible to speak of India and China and a whole variety of other countries like the EU in exactly the same fashion. So I think that one starts from the very beginning erroneously in trying to want too much. And when one wants too much, one always winds up with too little. And you see this progressively and successively going on. I think it's much better for the two countries to see themselves precisely dealing with some issues where there is agreement. In other issues, there's disagreement. And there's little need for this idea of congruence and partnership and all of those kinds of terms which have been mistakenly applied in the past?
In general terms, I agree with all Fischler about that. I think this is what happens at the global level, international relations. We are moving toward a kind of more variable geometry. It depends on the issue. In some issues we can cooperate, in others we will clash, and this is normal. This is not provided you are not transforming one problem into a global problem. Monopolize the national interests around one issue. In trade, we clash very often, as we are clashing with Argentina, which we are a partner, belong to the same system, and we clash. So in trade, we clash. In some aspects, we clash. In climate change, it depends on how we evolve the situation. In solving concrete situations, like now in Honduras, at one point in time we are together, then we have some differences, then maybe again we coincide. I think this is not a stable situation. In international relations, the idea of friendship, partnership, strategic, is rhetoric. You see, we have so many strategic partners, Argentina, China, France, United States. It's difficult to understand which one is really the strategic partner. So it's more rhetoric. You have interests, and you have some values. We have to see, we have to coincide in some values, for instance, democracy, or human rights, I don't know what, against torture, this kind of thing. In my case, anti-nuclearization of the world, in some thing. Then we have different questions that, depending on the question, will be in alliance or against, without any big trouble. Even UK and USA, which are brothers, from time to time you clash. So why expect, this kind of permanent alliance? It's not necessary. Good relations, okay, we have.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for mentioning crashing on trade, because this Monday we are going to have here at the Wilson Center a seminar on the cotton case, and that is a case of a major crash. Actually, it was President Cardoso's government who started the case by taking the subsidy cotton subsidy program of the United States to the WTO. The WTO decided that those subsidies were illegal. The remedies were not presented. Brazil is now allowed to retaliate against the United States. Come 4 o'clock this Monday, everything you wanted to know, was afraid to ask about this issue. Questions, please. Short, sweet questions.
There's one there.
Could you identify? Yes.
Lorenzo Pérez, former IMF mission chief during the years of President Cardoso. A question regarding public finances. There were a number of intrinsic problems like the pensions of the public civil servants, the horrendous indirect tax system that I believe still exists, the ICMF in Brazil, the relation between the states and the central government that were fairly regulated by the fiscal responsibility law, but also by your leadership and that of Minister Malan. I wonder whether you or Professor Fischler could comment how much of a problem is still that, and what type of inefficiency, what could be done?
Let me say a word about that, because I was about to comment on what has been said by all Fischler. He's right when he was, stressing the importance of the social security problem in Brazil. And it is extremely difficult to move because of the entrenched interest in Congress by corporations. I mean, by bureaucratic corporations, by unions and things like that. And in practice, we are going a step back, because it was possible only one small change in the whole system, which is so-called, I don't remember the name of the law, but then one law who forced the employees to stay for longer in public service. So now this decision is about to be counseled, and the government is not moving. So this increased the bad situation. So in order to have the coming president to be capable to do that, it will be required to have strong support in society and a political will. Which not, in that case, continuity will be a disaster, because continuity will mean not to be totally, complacent vis-à-vis what is going on. So I think, with regard to your more specific question, I would say there are attempts to break the responsibility law. In practice, if you look what's going on in terms of the federal budget, because of the world crisis, and because of the fact that all around the world flexibility is there, and now because even the central banks are being much more vulnerable in terms of the old practices. Well, now in Brazil we are discovering jeitinho, ways out, to not respect the fiscal responsibility law. So we are using several instruments and this could undermine the fiscal situation in the future.
Paul, do you want?
The only point there that I do want to emphasize is that Brazil has been waiting for a long time for a revision of its public revenue system, which involves the states very clearly, and the differing percentages that they tax. The problem in Brazil is twofold. One, although people don't fully appreciate this, Brazil still has a deficit overall, rather than everybody talks about a primary surplus, but Brazil has a deficit. And secondly, the size of the revenue collection does begin to have negative impact. Brazil clearly will have to work on that problem.
Okay, question? Marcia.
Thank you for the brilliant. My name is Marcia Cota, and I'm with Conservation International, and I'm going to copy President Fernando Henrique Cardoso, if I may, and be seated because I feel more comfortable speaking this way. Thank you very much for the brilliant analysis about Brazil, both from President Cardoso and Professor Fischler. One topic that I haven't heard here today, and I feel it's always been marginalized and peripheral when talking about a Brazilian vision, is the environment. And I would like to hear more where you stand, Mr. President and Professor Fischler, on a Brazilian vision for the environment, what we should do and how this is going to play in the next elections. Hopefully now with Marina Silva running for president, and this is going to be a hot topic in the agenda of the other candidates. But what is your take on the Brazilian vision about the environment, what we should do, where we should head? Thank you.
Well, it's difficult to speak about a Brazilian vision on that matter. There is no one vision, even in government. Marina Silva withdrew. Why? Because of that. Because no consensus within the government. There is a kind of polarization. On one side, people believe, what is important is to growth. On the other side, I will have to pay more attention to environment. Of course, this is a polar situation. In between, there are several possibilities. But then how? At one point, they clash, and Marina decided to resign from the position there. And apparently, the new minister is more flexible in allowing, licenses for, new dams and things like that. Not clear. So this is not the government. This is Brazil. People is a kind of hesitation between what is more important for us, to grow fast or to take into account the environment, without having the idea that it's possible to reconcile. Now, because of Copenhagen, some steps ahead are being, I suppose, are being done. At least we're in the discourse, which is important anyhow. As you probably know, the main question in Brazil, our main contribution to the green gases, emission is because of the burning of forests. I don't know exactly, maybe at least 60% of our contribution derives from that. This is ridiculous because what for? Because we have land is not difficult to determine which part of the land could be used for, I don't know, cattle or soybean. It's not necessary for the growing up of the Brazilian economy to burn the forest. It is difficult to stop burning. I know, because I was president and I was not able to stop burning because we don't have enough resources. And it's not just a question of resources. The awareness of the importance of the thing has to be better spread in such a way that local people will also help to stop burning. One part of the burning of the forest because of landless people invading the area, plus the big farmers, plus the foreign companies, so on and so forth. I personally am in favor of zero in terms of burning. Zero. This should be the goal. Total zero. It's senseless to say. The Brazilian industry is much more aware. So the Brazilian industry is not contributing to the climate change. For them, it's not difficult to adjust to some goals. And as you know, the energy metrics in Brazil is rather favorable because basically it depends on hydroelectricity. And then we have also ethanol, which also helps, so on and so forth. But then in any case, the transportation services are also responsible for emission. And now we have oil, which is something which we have to discuss in depth. What to do, how to extract this oil, what part of the profit coming from oil will be designated to deal with the environment question. So there are lots of problems and lots of opportunities. I would say since 1992 on, the consciousness about the question is expanding in Brazil. Lula's government has been to some extent less sensitive, in spite of Marina. And now I would say is more sensitive because of the world, and also because of the fact that Marina resigned. It's more sensitive. And the social pressure is now also going up. Well, let's see the outcome. It's not this. In America, it's extremely difficult. I remember I was negotiating with Bill Clinton about the Kyoto Protocol. It was terrible. Extremely difficult in America. So how will it be easy in Brazil? No, it's difficult. It's difficult. You have to fight. But every day, the news are coming informing that this is a serious problem. This is a serious problem. So I'm trustful that we move ahead in a more decent and reasonable way.
Questions? I will do. Wait, lady there. Yes.
Good morning. My name is. Oh, thank you. Good morning. My name is Joy Garner, and my question is something that doesn't get as much spotlight, but slightly, since the Olympics will be held in Brazil, and that is regarding the drug abuse issue, the substance abuse issue within Brazil, and particularly the growing use of crack cocaine. Or pasta base, as it's called in some South American countries, and the influx of cocaine from its neighboring countries. To your understanding, is that even seen as a health? Will that be perceived and approached as a health issue or a personal issue? Will it be kind of skirted underneath the rug as some of the homeless were shooed away when the Atlanta Olympics came in 1996? What exactly, to your understanding, will be the treatment or the addressing of substance abuse within Brazil to any extent? Thank you.
Well, in this afternoon we'll have a discussion on the drug issue at the Inter-American Dialogue. As you probably know, I have been involved in the issue because we create a Commission on Latin American Commission on Drugs. I was one of the chair of that commission, and so it's not easy to respond to you. Of course, this is not a problem to be just postponed up to the Olympics game. It's a problem now going on, and it's extremely difficult. Yesterday we had a dinner at the Capitol Hill with some U.S. representatives about the issue, and every time we discuss the issue, we understand that there are additional dimensions to be taken into account. One is what to do with the users of drug. As you know, up to very recently, the American government was supporting the idea of a war on drugs and to put in jail everyone, user, trafficant, or dealer. Well, the result is it's a failure in practice. I'm not saying that them is not necessary to fight against trafficking of drugs. No, it's necessary. It's continue to fight. What I'm saying is it's not enough to repression. We have to have also treatment. We have to have also prevention. We have maybe to qualify what kind of drug. Marijuana is one thing. Cocaine is another one. Crack is another. Heroin is another. So it's not the same. Yesterday, in the conversation in Capitol Hill was the former head of state in Switzerland. For her, as a lady, it's obvious that the important thing is to treat the drug addicts, because Switzerland has a small population and no violence tied to drug use and abuse. The only people, so they have to be patient, not prisoners. In Brazil, we have violence. The main question is the violence provoked by the trafficking and the landlords controlling parts of the territory in cities in Brazil. So it's much more complicated. It's not enough to offer good health treatment. It's necessary also to be alert in terms of how to use coercion to limit the action of drug lords. Then normally what happens in these areas is the fact that the government is absent. We have to put government there, that is to say, to put schools and hospitals and police, not only specifically to fight and to kill people, because this is terrible, they are killing too, but to be there to safeguard the population. So it's a very complicated problem. There are some good examples, including in Rio, some good examples. 6, I guess, favelas have been cleaned up from the drug lords, and there is a kind of so-called peaceful police working there, NGOs working there, and the population is happy with that. I have very recently, I had several conversations with people from favela in Rio, including some mothers whose children have been killed by gangs or by police. They don't know. They are, aspiring to live peacefully. The day-by-day life of these people is terrible. The sense of fear, you see. So, and there are some progress being. I tell you, 6 favelas out of 700. So it's a long way, but no, we are not waiting for the Olympiads. We are trying to do something, and probably when the Olympiads will occur, drug will be there too.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have now.
Oh, well, thank you very much for your both interesting presentations. I would like to know in this new...
Identify yourself for the President.
Permanent representative of Uruguay to the Organization of American States. I would like to know which will be, in this role of Brazil to becoming a global actor, which will be the position or the vision regarding the regional integration. Thank you.
Well, if you have the opportunity to read Fischler's book, you see that what we did and to what extent we have been successful, what have been the failure, what has to be done yet. Of course, we still have the idea that it's important to continue to make progress in integration. In our case, in the case of Brazil, we have a more complicated situation because you are also global traders. Our number one client is China now. Not even United States, it's China. But Mercosur is very important. And in Latin America is very important because USA plus Latin America are the region the only ones who import from Brazil manufacturers. China is raw material and minerals. Europe as well. So integration is crucial in terms of the quality of the Brazilian production. In spite, on top of different others advantages of integration. Unfortunately, I think that in the area of integration, instead of being more active in doing business and in connecting infrastructures, we are speaking about solidarity. We are speaking about political issues in terms of integration. Well, this is not the way. I think the way is to go first, to establish common interests. When I was still in office and Mercosur was already involved in trade disputes, and every new meeting the outcome will be anticipated, new accessions. Let's not to apply the common tariff. So I asked the president from South America to come together and to propose an infrastructural program to IDB, and the IDB prepared this infrastructural program. Something we have been capable to implement by ourselves. For instance, the linkage between Bolivia and Brazil for gas, the pipeline, the gas pipeline, with Venezuela. The electricity, the northern parts of Brazil had received electricity from Venezuela. It was Chavez who did, with me and now with Lula, with Argentina as well. So we have with Paraguay. Now we're discussing about it with Bolivia, something. So I think this is important because in that sense we create, necessarily common interests. In this common interest could be the fundamental for better progress in integration. But the idea integration continues to exist, and will continue.
Well, we had some questions from an overflow room because we had a lot of people interested in coming here, and they seem to be much more curious than you guys are because their questions are more pointed. And especially one that will be the last question, but it refers to obviously what comes before the post-Lula, which is an election. And I have a very serious questions here, some of them very specific, and I'll try to contain my own journalistic self and not ask the specific question, but would invite the president, if official wants also to jump in. If you could give us some of your thoughts about the outlook for the upcoming presidential election. Obviously, if you want to make a prediction, feel free.
You start now. That's the answer.
That's the answer.
It's a very interesting moment in Brazil, simply because the conditions under which this election will be held are so different from what has been characteristic historically. Elections have, in the past, been dominated by crisis, by problems of that sort or another. For the first time, people will now have a chance to try to decide which of two currents they wish to choose. What I think is necessary for the election to provide that opportunity is for the candidates of the PT and the PSDB to be clearer and more specific and more pointed in their notion of where Brazil goes. Now, how's that for avoiding the question?
Mr. President, would you like to add something?
Well, let's see. What has been said by Fischler is true. That is to say, now, are you going to the specifics? That is to say, in the past, the electoral campaign has been every time, almost every time, under very bad circumstances because of inflation, corruption. Corruption is still there. Corruption, inflation, and crisis, recession, so on and so forth. It was difficult to deal with other questions. As a matter of fact, during the electoral campaign, never has been said about that. Never has been said about the crisis, about the never. Nothing has been said, never, about that. The issues are different. And I don't know what will happen now. If you are asking for more specificity from the candidates, they are avoiding specificities. They are trying to speak about other things. One is my candidate, for my party. We have two candidates. From my party, they prefer not even to be considered as candidates now. And the other one is Lula's candidate. She is not yet the party candidate. Lula never asked about the party, or even herself. He decided. So the people, from the public opinion up to now, what exists is Lula, not a candidate. You see, so that's why public opinion surveys are doubtful in terms of prediction, because it's Lula what exists there. If you look the public opinion polls, the last one was 2 days ago. One of the candidates of my party is 38%. Lula's candidate 17%. So more than double, and the others are, fragmented. Well, if you look, Lula's popularity is 78% or something. So how to compatibilize that? What will occur? Several people ask, well, will Lula be capable to transfer votes? He's already doing that. She has zero. She has zero. She's just never have any political, position in Brazil. Never was a candidate. Nobody knows about her. So Lula was capable up to now to transfer 17. I don't know if he will continue to transfer or not. It will depend on the performance of the candidates. You are used to that because we are living mass democracies. So we have 125 million voters. So it's difficult to even to be noted by the electorate. So it will depend on the performance, and that's not what I would like to see. But not in terms of the content of each one of the candidates, but in terms of the way they will be presented as actors to the public. So the mass democracies are always risky. So anyhow, we have to ask what is behind each one. They will be elected by different reasons. They will be elected by the performance, by money, by state governmental pressure, by the monopolization of the media by one candidate or another. These are crucial factors. I don't know who will win the elections. Anyhow, the question is, do they have difference in terms of the tradition of each one of the two sides? Yes, there are some differences in spite of continuity, because the continuity was assured by very specific circumstances and by Lula, who has been capable to deal with social movements, with the entrepreneurs, with his party, other parties, and to deny everything he said all life. Well, gratefully. But it's true. It's true. I don't know now if the Lula's candidate will be capable to do the same, or if she will, I don't know if she will be even the candidate, but if she will be the candidate, if she wins, if she will be capable to deal with these different factors: the Congress, social movements, opposition, entrepreneurs, global arena, so on and so forth. So in that sense, I would say it's more unpredictable. More unpredictable. I'm not saying that it will be bad or good, unpredictable. If the candidate from my party will be the president, it's more predictable. Not maybe Lula will be more in continuity with me than the candidate of my party in some aspects, but has an overall yes, they will be more predictable. And what is the main difference? The main difference is we believe more in public opinion, society, democracy than in corporations, partnership, participation behind the scene in the decision-making process. These are the differences. The rest are circumstances. I don't know. I hope that the difference that now exists could even eventually diminish, but we will keep the leadership up to the end. And in that case, I'll say what has been said about fiscality, about social security, all these things, with higher probability will be at least try to be implemented. Because if the candidate will be Sarah is an economist, has this more awareness of the circumstances, and if the other candidate from my party is the same, it's true because he was a good governor in the state of São Paulo. I would say that Dilma Rousseff she is also serious in terms of what she did in energy, so on and so forth. But what I am saying is that I don't know if she will be capable to refrain the impetus coming from his camp against what is needed to be done and implemented in Brazil.
Well, with that, I would like to thank you all for coming. I thank Ambassador Gildenhorn, Ambassador Harrington, my dear friend Peter, but very especially Professor Albert Fischlow, and very, very especially the honor to have President Fernando Henrique Cardoso with us. And I would ask you to join us in thanking the President and Professor Fischlow.
I mean, I don't see how you can not see more. Yes. The nature of it. ¿Vamos a almorzar o ya está todo el día los 80?
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Very, very. No, I haven't.
So you had to finish the last check.
Yes. Well, that has some virtue since it's going off.
How are you doing?
Doing well, although December's always busy. So
What do you think Shannon is supposed to think of this?
I have been following it and trying to help, but I had some encouragement with
Your name?
Florida, because this friend.
Where are you from?
I thought you placeholder.
Right.